She told me at our anniversary dinner that she deserved better. I smiled, picked up the check, and wished her luck. 6 weeks later in a courthouse in Denver, she found out exactly what better meant, and it wasn't what she planned. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 47 years old, and for the past 9 years I've run a structural engineering firm out of Denver. We do bridge assessments, highway infrastructure audits, and safety certifications for the Colorado Department of Transportation. It's not glamorous work. My wife never thought so anyway, but it pays well, it matters, and I built it from nothing with a license, a laptop, and a used pickup truck. My wife Elena was an interior designer. She worked with high-end residential clients, the kind of people who spent more on a kitchen backsplash than most families spend on a car. She was good at her job. She understood what wealthy people wanted before they could articulate it themselves. And somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing our life as a foundation and started seeing it as a ceiling. She'd been different for about 5 months before the dinner. Quieter at home, louder on her phone. She started attending industry events I wasn't invited to. She came home from one of them smelling like a cologne I didn't own. I noticed. I didn't say anything yet. I just started paying closer attention. The restaurant she chose for our 12th anniversary was called Ardor, a place on the 16th floor of a downtown hotel with a view of the Rockies and a menu written in a font that was harder to read than the prices. She wore a dress I'd never seen before and earrings that looked new. She ordered wine before I'd even opened the menu. I made reservations here because she'd mentioned it 3 times in the past month. I thought I was doing something right. We were halfway through our entrees when she set her fork down and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as businesslike. Rehearsed. "Marcus," she said, "I need to tell you something." I set my own fork down. I already knew this wasn't going to be a toast. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she continued. "About us. About what I want from my life." She folded her hands on the table like she was leading a meeting. "I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. I haven't been for a while. I think we've grown in different directions." I didn't say anything. I waited. She looked at me like she expected me to interrupt, to argue, to beg. When I didn't, she took a breath and kept going. "I've met someone. His name is Daniel Schaefer. He's a real estate developer. He just finished a project in Lodo. You've probably seen the building on 17th. She said this like it was a credential, like I should be impressed on her behalf. "He understands my vision. He wants to invest in my firm and help me grow it into something real. He can give me a life that matches who I actually am." I looked at her for a moment. Then I reached over, picked up my wine glass, and took a slow sip. "I understand," I said. She blinked. That's all you have to say? I think you should do what makes you happy, Elena." She stared at me. She braced for a scene. For raised voices, for tears, for some kind of negotiation. Instead, I signaled our waiter, asked for the check, and when it came, I signed it without looking at the total. $460 for an anniversary dinner that ended our marriage. I held her coat for her on the way out. Old habit. In the parking garage, she stood by her car and looked at me like she was trying to find something in my face. Guilt, maybe, or devastation. Some sign that she'd mattered enough to break me. "You're not even upset," she said. "I'm processing," I said. "I hope it works out for you." I drove home alone. The house was dark when I pulled in. I'd known for 3 months that something was wrong. I hadn't hired an investigator immediately, but eventually I did. His name was Ray Clifton. He was retired law enforcement, methodical and quiet, and he'd handed me a folder 2 weeks earlier that I hadn't been able to stop thinking about since. Photos, dates, locations. Elena and Daniel Schaefer at a resort in Vail. Elena at his penthouse building downtown. A paper trail of small financial transfers that I hadn't been able to explain until Ray explained them for me. Daniel Schaefer looked like exactly what he was supposed to look like. Tall, silver at the temples. The kind of casual confidence that comes from never having worried about anything small. He drove a Maserati and had been photographed at enough charity galas to make his name Google-friendly. He was exactly the type Elena had always wanted to be adjacent to. I went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a while. Then I called my attorney. Her name was Patricia Ogden, and she picked up on the second ring even at 9:45 on a Thursday night because that's the kind of attorney she was. "She told me tonight," I said. Patricia was quiet for 2 seconds. "Good. That means the timing works in our favor. Come in tomorrow morning, first thing." Her office was in a building on Glenarm. I was there by 8. She had coffee waiting and a legal pad with notes already started, which told me she'd been thinking about this since my call the previous night. Tell me what she knows about the C. contract, Patricia said. Nothing, I said. I signed the NDA in February. She knows I have ongoing work with the state, but she doesn't know the scale. Patricia nodded and wrote something down. The contract I was referring to had taken 2 years to develop. It was a comprehensive infrastructure safety partnership with the Colorado Department of Transportation, a rolling 5-year engagement for bridge and highway structural audits across the northern corridor of the state. Total value, $61 million. My firm had been the only one that met all the technical qualifications and could provide the liability coverage the state required. The final contract had been executed 11 days ago. Elena had moved out 6 days after that. The timing was not a coincidence. She'd been waiting until she thought she knew what she was leaving behind. She just didn't know what she was actually leaving behind. Patricia walked me through the financial picture with the precision of someone dismantling a clock, based on what she knows. Patricia said, sliding a worksheet across the desk, she's expecting roughly $320,000 in assets. Your home equity, your retirement accounts, and what she thinks your business is worth based on last year's tax filings. And what's the actual number? Patricia looked at her notes. With the C. contract, the business restructuring you completed in January, and the 2 new subcontracts that fall under the new LLC, she has a claim to approximately none of the growth. You restructured 4 months ago. The new entity didn't exist during the marriage, and the C. contract was executed post-separation. She gets the old structure, which is worth about $18,000 on paper after liabilities. I sat with that for a moment. There's more, Patricia said. Your wife's boyfriend. I had Ray dig deeper after your call last night. She slid a printed report across the desk. Daniel Schaefer. The building on 17th she'd mentioned like it was evidence of his worth. The one she'd told me about at dinner had been financed through a combination of a commercial construction loan and 3 private investors. The loan had gone into technical default 18 months ago, when 2 of those investors pulled out. The building was completed only because Schaefer had personally guaranteed the remaining debt. He was managing the building under a revenue-sharing agreement with the bank that held the note. He didn't own it. He was caretaking it while creditors sorted out what was recoverable. The Maserati was leased. The penthouse was owned by a holding company of which he was a minority stakeholder, a stakeholder who hadn't received a distribution in 14 months. Daniel Schaefer was a very convincing approximation of a wealthy man. He was not, in fact, a wealthy man. Elena had traded a $61 million contract she didn't know existed for a man whose net worth was a negative number with a lot of zeros. I drove home through downtown. I passed the building on 17th. It was nice. Glass and steel catching the morning sun. A monument to someone else's money that my wife had mistaken for her future. She filed for divorce the following Monday. Her attorney was a man named Curtis Hale, who had a reputation for aggressive discovery and settlement pressure. The petition was standard: irreconcilable differences, equitable division of marital assets, spousal support, primary interest in the family home. Patricia's response was 2 words in her email to me. Good. Finally. The next few weeks were quieter than I expected. Elena and I didn't speak. She was staying with Daniel, I assumed. The house felt different without her. Not worse, exactly, just recalibrated. I worked long hours and ran 6 miles every morning and ate dinner at my desk most nights. My sister Carol called on a Sunday. I'm glad you called, actually, she said before I could say anything. There's something I've been holding on to that you need to know. I didn't say it before because I didn't think it was my place, but now I think it is. Go ahead. You remember Elena's mother? Carol said. Diane. I remembered Diane, a small, watchful woman who had never liked me much. She was gracious in the way that some people are gracious, perfectly calibrated to appear warm while remaining fundamentally cold. Diane introduced Elena to Daniel Schaefer, Carol said. On purpose, about 8 months ago, at a fundraiser for a historic preservation group that Diane sits on the board of. Diane knew Daniel socially. She also knew Elena was unhappy. She made the introduction because she thought Elena deserved. And I'm quoting here because Diane said this to my friend Joanna at a book club, someone in her own league. I closed my eyes. She never thought you were enough, Carol said quietly. And I don't mean Diane. I mean, Diane raised Elena to believe that a husband was a category of asset, not a person. I watched it for 12 years and I never said anything, and I'm sorry. I sat for a moment with that. Why are you telling me now? Because Joanna finally told me what Diane said, and because Elena called me last week, Carol continued. She wanted me to talk to you, convince you to settle quickly and not make things difficult. I told her no, and then I called you. I thanked my sister, and we talked for a while longer about nothing important, which was exactly what I needed. 2 weeks before the court date, Patricia called me into her office. Sit down, she said when I walked in. There's something you need to see. She pushed a manila folder across the desk. Inside were bank statements. An account in Elena's name, opened 14 months ago, funded by transfers from her mother's interior design consulting business. The transfers were labeled as professional fees. They were not professional fees. Over the course of 14 months, $52,000 had moved through that account. None of it had been reported on our joint tax returns. There was also a document from a medical clinic. I won't describe it in detail. What it told me was that Elena had been pregnant 4 months before she left, and that she had made a decision about that pregnancy without telling me. She had gone alone. She had paid cash. I sat with that for a long time. Patricia watched me without saying anything, which I appreciated. She was already planning to leave, I said finally. The timing lines up, Patricia said. She found out and made a calculation. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, a light snow was falling on the city. The kind of early November snow that doesn't stick, just makes everything look briefly clean. Is this admissible? The bank records are subpoenable. The medical records, I got them through a source I trust, but they can't be introduced directly. What they do is give me context. I know what questions to ask. I know where to look. She has no idea what's coming, I said. None, Patricia said. I turned away from the window. Let's make sure the court date goes exactly as planned. 2 days before the hearing, a package arrived at my office. No return address, just a courier service I didn't recognize. Inside was a USB drive and a note on plain paper. No signature. Just, I thought you should have this. There were 2 folders on the drive. The first contained screenshots of text messages between Elena and her mother going back 10 months. In them, Diane had coached Elena on how to handle the separation. There was a message from Diane suggesting a specific appraiser for the house, one who would come in conservative. There was another message discussing how to frame the separation timeline to maximize Elena's claim to assets. One message, sent the week before our anniversary dinner, read simply, make sure the account is clean before you file. The second folder was a video. Security camera footage from the lobby of Daniel Schaefer's building. Timestamped 11 weeks earlier. Elena and Diane sitting in 2 chairs near the window. The audio was faint but clear enough. Diane's voice, you need to make sure the paperwork is filed before any new contracts come through. Your father waited too long and we pay for it. Elena's voice, I know, Mom. I know. Diane, Daniel can give you what you need. But only if you move before Marcus ties up the business in ways you can't touch. Elena, what if he fights it? Diane, he won't. He never fights it. It's why I told you to marry him in the first place. He's stable, and he doesn't make trouble. I watched it twice. Then I sent it to Patricia. She called me back in 4 minutes. Her voice had the energy of someone who had just been handed exactly what they needed. The footage was filmed in a public lobby, she said. It's admissible, and combined with the text messages, it establishes a conspiracy that predates the divorce filing by months. Curtis Hale has no idea this exists. What do you want to do with it? I asked. I want to let him walk into that courtroom tomorrow thinking he has leverage, Patricia said, and then I want to show him exactly what he's standing in. The courthouse was a beige building downtown with harsh fluorescent hallways and wooden benches that had absorbed years of other people's worst days. Patricia and I arrived 15 minutes early. Elena was already there, sitting with Curtis Hale in the hallway. She was wearing a charcoal blazer and had her hair pulled back. She looked composed. She glanced at me when I walked in, and her expression gave nothing away. I nodded once. She looked back at her attorney. The judge was a man named Howard Grayson, 50s, reading glasses, the manner of someone who had stopped being surprised by anything in a courtroom about 15 years ago. He sat down, reviewed the case file, and looked up over his glasses at both tables. Mr. Hale, I understand the petitioner is seeking equitable division of marital assets and spousal support. Is that correct? Hale stood. That's correct. Hale stood. That's correct, Your Honor. My client has been a cooperative partner in this marriage, contributing substantially to the household over 12 years, and simply seeks a fair resolution. Judge Grayson looked at Patricia. Ms. Ogden? Patricia stood. Your Honor, we've prepared a comprehensive financial disclosure that we believe will be relevant to the court's determination of what constitutes fair. She handed a binder to the clerk. One copy went to the judge. Another went to Hale. I watched Hale open it. I watched his expression change in real time. The way a person's face changes when the ground shifts under them, and they haven't caught up yet. Judge Grayson read silently for close to 4 minutes. The courtroom was quiet enough that I could hear Elena's breathing across the aisle. Mr. Ton. Hale. The judge said without looking up. Were you aware that your client has been receiving unreported income through an account connected to her mother's business over the past 14 months? Hale cleared his throat. No, Your Honor. That's the first I'm hearing of it. Were you aware that your client and her mother were recorded in a conversation discussing the deliberate timing of the divorce filing to prevent the respondent from completing a business contract? Hale looked at Elena. She had gone pale. No, Your Honor. Were you aware that the respondent recently finalized a state infrastructure contract worth $61 million, executed after the date of separation under a business entity formed prior to the marriage's breakdown? The silence was total. Elena turned to look at me. Her face had lost all of its composure. She looked like someone who had just realized they had been standing on a trapdoor the entire time. Under Colorado law, Judge Grayson said, post-separation income belongs to the earning party. Given the evidence before me regarding the petitioner's concealment of income and the coordinated effort to time this filing, I am inclined to weigh any division heavily in the respondent's favor. We'll take a 15-minute recess. Mr. P-minute recess. Hale, I strongly suggest you have a frank conversation with your client. The recess room was small and smelled like old coffee. Elena sat across from me with Curtis Hale beside her and Patricia beside me. Hale had aged visibly in the past 45 minutes. Let me explain the position, Patricia said, her voice steady and professional. Your client has concealed income. She has participated in coordinated financial deception. The house your client wants has a foundation issue discovered during inspection last month. Remediation estimate is $90,000. Your client's partner, Mr. Schaefer, filed for personal bankruptcy protection 6 months ago and has a negative net worth of approximately $1.8 million. The $61 million contract is entirely outside this proceeding. Hale leaned close to Elena and said something in a low voice. She shook her head slightly. What's the offer? Hale asked. Patricia slid a document across the table. Full transfer of the house with all associated debt, liens, and remediation costs. Elena retains her personal property in her vehicle. She receives $15,000 in cash. In exchange, she releases all claims to any other marital asset, the business, retirement accounts, and any future income. Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. That's nothing. That's more than you'll receive at trial, Patricia said calmly. At trial, the IRS will also receive a referral regarding the unreported income. I want to be very clear about that. Hale put his hand on Elena's arm. She was looking at me. Her eyes were red and she was working very hard to hold herself together. I saw her searching my face for something. Regret, maybe, or the version of me that would soften this. I looked back at her quietly and said nothing. Why, she said finally. Why didn't you tell me? About the contract, about the business. If I had known, you would have stayed for the money, I said. Not for me. She opened her mouth and closed it again. That's not what I meant. I think it is, I said. There was a long silence. Elena picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking. She signed her name in 3 places. I walked out of the room without looking back. Patricia caught up with me in the hallway and handed me a copy of the settlement document. It's done, she said. I know. She shook my hand. What are you going to do? I looked out the window at the gray November sky. Go back to work, I said. I have 2 audits due before the end of the month. She laughed once. That's the right answer. I drove back to the office. My project manager, a steady man named Terrence who had been with me for 6 years, looked up when I walked in. How'd it go? He asked. It's over, I said. Pull up the Morrison Creek Bridge file. I want to go over the load calculations before the state review. He nodded and turned back to his screen, which was exactly the right response. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office on the 4th floor of a building in the Reno district. We'd expanded to 19 employees. The CDOT partnership had opened contracts with 2 other state transportation departments and 1 federal infrastructure authority. We were doing work that mattered, real work. The kind that would still be standing 50 years from now. My assistant knocked on the open door. "There's a woman here," she said. "Says her name is Elena Webb. She says it's personal." I looked up from the inspection report I was reviewing. "Give me 5 minutes," I said. "Then send her in." Elena looked different. She was dressed plainly. Jeans, a dark jacket, and she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She stood just inside the doorway like she wasn't sure she'd been invited far enough in. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. "Sit down if you want." She sat. "Sit down if you want." She sat. She put her hands in her lap and looked at the surface of my desk for a moment before looking at me. "I lost the house," she said. "I couldn't make the mortgage payments after the remediation started. The bank foreclosed in February." She paused. "Daniel was gone by January. When he understood I didn't have any assets, he stopped returning my calls. I found out later he'd moved in with another woman. Someone with real money this time?" I didn't say anything. I just waited. "I'm living with a friend in Thornton. I'm doing residential staging work, small jobs, nothing like what I had." She looked out the window. "I saw the announcement about your state contract in the Denver Business Journal. The full scope of it." She stopped. "I had no idea." "I know," I said. She looked at me. Her voice was careful, like she was choosing every word. "I need you to understand something. What I did, the way I did it, I told myself I was being practical. I told myself that love wasn't enough, that I was thinking about my future." She shook her head. "I was listening to my mother. I'd been listening to my mother for so long that I stopped asking whether she was right." She looked at her hands. "She's not right. She was never right." I waited. "I'm not here to ask for anything," Elena said. "I'm not here to reopen anything. I needed to tell you that I know what you were. I know what I had. And I'm sorry." I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city was bright under a clear January sky. The mountains were visible all the way to the horizon, white and permanent. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "I mean that, but I need you to understand something in return. What's done is done. I moved on. Not because I'm angry. I'm not anymore. But because I spent 12 years building something with someone who had already decided I was a means to an end. I don't have anything left to give you. Not a second chance. Not reassurance. Nothing. What I have now is mine, and I built it after you left, and I'd like to keep it that way." She nodded slowly. "I know," she said quietly. "I just needed to say it out loud." She stood, picked up her bag, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused. "Are you happy?" she asked. "You don't have to answer." I thought about it for a moment. "Yeah," I said. "I am." She nodded once more, then walked out. I stood at the window and watched the traffic on the street below for a while. Somewhere across the city, my sister was probably having lunch. Terrence was reviewing soil reports in the next room. In 3 hours, I had a call with the Federal Highway Administration about an assessment proposal for a bridge system in Wyoming. Real work, concrete and steel, and the patient math of load-bearing structures that either hold or they don't. Elena had told me at our anniversary dinner that she deserved better. She had been right about that. She had deserved better than a life spent measuring herself against the wrong things. She'd just been looking for it in the wrong direction. I turned away from the window, sat back down at my desk, and got back to work.